Welcome to our channel, your gateway to the most spine-chilling tales and unnerving true stories. Today, we present a true story, lost in the luminous dark. Story of welcoming. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised shade of purple as Sarah's interview at the prestigious tech firm ended. The tension of the day clung to her like a damp shawl, the corporate jargon and probing questions still echoing in her mind. She stepped out of the gleaming glass building into the balmy evening air, her heels clicking against the pavement as she made her way to her rented sedan. The bustling city streets of Silicon Valley had already started to empty out, the symphony of traffic giving way to a more solemn serenade of distant sirens and the occasional chirp of a cricket. Sarah slid into the driver's seat, the leather emitting a comforting sigh as she started the engine. The GPS on her phone, her silent companion for the trip, offered her two routes home, the fast-paced highway or the scenic route through the forest. She had been cooped up in boardrooms and hotel suites for the past week, and the prospect of a solitary drive through nature's embrace seemed like a balm to her weary soul. With a decisive tap, she chose the latter. The city lights grew sparse as she ventured further, the urban sprawl giving way to the serene countryside. The road grew narrower, the asphalt darkening as the trees grew denser. Her eyes danced over the dashboard, checking the time. It was later than she had planned, but the quiet solitude of the journey had a calming effect on her nerves. The GPS, a trusty device she had come to rely on, began to act erratically. The voice grew distant, the route line on the screen flickering like a candle flame in a storm. Sarah frowned, but the voice assured her she was on the correct path. The forest grew denser, the towering trees leaning in, if whispering secrets to one another, their leaves rustling in a soft lullaby that grew eerier with every passing mile. The first sign of trouble came when the GPS instructed her to take a sharp turn onto a dirt road. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she trusted the technology implicitly. The car's tires crunched over the gravel, sending plumes of dust into the air, which caught the beam of her headlights like a swarm of moths around a flame. The road grew steeper, the trees more overbearing, their branches stretching over the path like a twisted canopy. The fog began to roll in, a soft, suffocating blanket that seemed to swallow the light. Raindrops, large and solitary at first, grew into a steady rhythm on the windshield. She turned the wipers on, the swish-swish sound becoming a metronome to the tension building in her chest. Suddenly, a pair of piercing headlights appeared in her rearview mirror, the unmistakable outline of a truck growing larger with each pulse of her racing heart. The vehicle followed her, unbothered by the poor visibility or the winding road. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to speed up, to leave the menacing presence behind, but her GPS remained steadfast in its insistence that she stay the course. The truck grew closer, its engine a persistent, growling reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. She could make out the silhouette of the driver, a broad-shouldered man wearing a trucker's cap, his features obscured by the foggy night. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she considered her options. The fog thickened, reducing her visibility to mere feet in front of her. The GPS spoke again, the voice now a cold, mechanical whisper that sent shivers down her spine. Proceed to the highlighted route, it intoned, guiding her down a path that grew increasingly treacherous. The rain picked up, the wipers struggling to keep up with the deluge. The forest felt alive, the trees seeming to reach out and grab at her car as if they were trying to pull her into their shadowy embrace. Her breath grew shallow as she rounded a particularly sharp bend. A deer, startled by the intrusion, darted across the road. Sarah slammed on the brakes, her heart in her throat, the truck's headlights looming ever closer. The deer vanished into the brush, and she let out a tremulous sigh, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The GPS spoke again, the voice now unmistakably male, and far less robotic. Good reflexes, Sarah. Her blood ran cold. She had never programmed the device with her name. She glanced into the rearview mirror, expecting to see the truck's grille breathing down her neck, but the headlights had vanished. Her eyes darted to the side mirrors, searching for the reflective eyes of the driver. but all she found was the inky blackness of the night. Panic rising, she stepped on the gas, the sedan straining as it climbed the incline. The rain had become a downpour, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the waterfall that was her windshield. The GPS spoke again, the voice now a sinister chuckle. "You can't outrun your fate, Sarah." Her eyes darted to the screen, searching for any sign of the truck, but the map remained static, showing only the solitary line of her route through the forest. The voice grew fainter, replaced by the patter of rain and the symphony of her own racing thoughts. The car lurched, the GPS emitting a high-pitched squeal before going dark. The engine coughed and sputtered, the headlights fading to a dull glow before giving out entirely. Sarah was plunged into a world of absolute darkness, the rain a cacophony against the car's metal shell. In the distance, she heard the low rumble of the truck's engine, growing louder. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she fumbled for her phone, the screen a beacon in the abyss. The GPS was offline, the signal lost in the thick forest. She punched in the emergency number, her trembling fingers slipping on the slick screen. The call dropped before it could connect. The headlights grew closer, the fog parting like a curtain to reveal the massive semi-truck, its chrome grille gleaming with rainwater. The driver leaned on his horn, the sound piercing the quiet night like a shriek. Sarah's eyes grew wide with terror as she realized she was stuck, her car refusing to start. The truck stopped mere inches from her bumper, the headlights casting long, terrifying shadows across the damp earth. The driver's side door swung open, the interior light illuminating a figure in a rain-soaked jacket. The man descended from the cabin, his boots squelching in the mud as he approached her car. He tapped on her window, the sound echoing through the dense silence. Sarah's hand hovered over the door lock, her mind racing. The man leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass. He spoke, his voice a gruff whisper that seemed to resonate from the very fabric of the night. "You're lost, aren't you?" The rain had been relentless, a steady drumbeat on the windshield of Sarah's car that mirrored the tumultuous rhythm of her thoughts. The job interview she'd had earlier in the day had gone poorly. She could feel it in her bones. The potential employer's cold stare had seemed to pierce through her, laying bare every inadequacy she had tried to bury beneath her confident exterior. As she drove away from the city, the GPS on her phone had seemed like a cruel joke, guiding her down a twisting, desolate road that grew more unfamiliar with each passing mile. The wipers swept back and forth in a hypnotic dance, but even they couldn't clear the fog that clung to the windshield. The forest loomed around her, a wall of darkness that swallowed the beam of her headlights. She had been on the road 4 hours, and the digital clock on her dashboard had rolled over to 2 a.m. The GPS remained unhelpfully silent. The distance to her next turn, a maddeningly constant 62 miles. It was then that she saw it, a beacon in the night, a flickering neon sign that read "Rest Easy Motel." The sight of it sent a shiver down her spine. It was almost too perfect, too out of place amidst the oppressive forest. But the promise of a warm bed and a chance to escape the storm was too tempting to resist. Sarah slowed her car, the tires protesting against the wet asphalt as she turned onto the unmarked road that led to the motel. The dense foliage parted like a curtain, revealing a clearing. The motel was a relic of a bygone era, a single-story building with peeling paint and a parking lot overgrown with weeds. The vacancy sign flashed erratically, casting a sickly green light over the scene. Her car rolled to a stop in front of the office, the engine sighing in relief as she turned it off. Rain pattered against the metal roof, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The door to the office creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room that smelled faintly of mold and disuse. An ancient bell chimed weakly, announcing her arrival to no one in particular. The counter was cluttered with dusty knickknacks and a guest book that looked as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Behind the counter, a man emerged from the shadows. He was tall, with a lanky frame and a greasy comb-over that looked as if it had been in place 4 days. His eyes were a piercing blue, and they studied her with a curiosity that bordered on hostility. "Looking for a room?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rasp. Sarah nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Just for the night. The man handed her a key attached to a plastic fob that read Room 13. You're in luck, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We've got one left. Room 13 was at the far end of the motel, the last bastion of civilization before the forest swallowed the asphalt hole. She stepped inside, the door groaning shut behind her. The room was musty, the bed covers pulled taut over a mattress that looked as if it had seen better days. The wallpaper was peeling, and the carpet felt sticky beneath her feet, but it was dry, and that was all that mattered. Sarah dropped her bag on the chair and peeled off her damp clothes, replacing them with a pair of worn pajamas. She pulled the curtains shut, blocking out the glow of the neon sign outside. As she lay down, the rain grew louder, a symphony of nature's fury that seemed to echo her own turmoil. The bed protested with a series of creaks as she settled in, but it was surprisingly comfortable. Her eyes grew heavy, and she slipped into a fitful sleep, plagued by dreams of shadowy figures and the persistent murmur of an unseen river. When she awoke, it was to the sound of a knock at the door. Sarah sat up with a start, the digital clock on the nightstand glowing 3:33 a.m. She threw on her robe and approached the door, peering through the peephole. The man from the office stood outside, holding a tray with a steaming cup of coffee. Complimentary, he said, his voice muffled through the wood. Thought you might need it. Sarah hesitated, but the warmth of the brew was too enticing. She cracked the door open, just enough to take the tray without letting him in. The man's smile remained fixed as he retreated into the night, disappearing into the gloom. The coffee was surprisingly good, strong and bitter. She took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through her body like a comforting blanket. But as she sipped, she noticed something peculiar, a faint, metallic aftertaste. The rest of the night passed without incident, but Sarah's sleep was haunted by whispers and distant footsteps. When she finally woke for good, the rain had stopped, and the feeble sun was trying to break through the clouds. She showered quickly, the water a tepid trickle that barely managed to wash away the cobwebs of her slumber. Dressed and ready to leave, she stepped outside, the cool air a stark contrast to the stifling room. The parking lot was empty, save for her car and the truck that had been dogging her since the beginning of her detour. The sight of it sent a shiver down her spine. As she approached the office to check out, she noticed something odd about the guest book. It was open to a page with her name already scrawled in messy handwriting. The date beside it was from a week ago. She flipped through the pages, heart racing. Every entry was for her, each with a different date. Panic began to set in as she realized she had no recollection of writing any of them. On the road again, the GPS remained silent. The fog had lifted, revealing a landscape that was eerily familiar, yet subtly altered. Trees had shifted, the contours of the road changed, and the truck was back, a constant presence in her rearview mirror. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to piece together the puzzle of her night at the Rest Easy Motel. The coffee, the guest book, the persistent truck, nothing made sense. As she drove, the miles ticked away, each one bringing her closer to the phantom intersection where she had made the fateful turn. She could feel the tension in her shoulders, the grip on the steering wheel tightening. The GPS finally spoke up, its robotic voice calm and reassuring. You have arrived at your destination. Sarah looked around, but there was nothing. No intersection, no turnoff, just the endless stretch of road. She was about to drive on when she spotted it, a small, almost imperceptible dirt path that veered off into the trees. Her gut told her to ignore it, to keep going and never look back. But curiosity, or perhaps something darker, compelled her to turn onto the path. It grew narrower, the branches of the trees reaching out to claw at her car like desperate hands. The underbrush grew thicker, swallowing the tires in mud and leaves. The path opened up into a clearing, revealing a house that seemed to have been torn from the pages of a Gothic novel. It was sprawling and decrepit, the paint peeling away to reveal rotting wood beneath. The windows were boarded up, and the porch listed to one side. Sarah stepped out of the car, her heart hammering in her chest. The silence was absolute, save for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. As she approached the house, the door swung open with a groan. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The furniture was arranged as if the inhabitants had simply vanished without a trace. In the living room, she found a photograph of a family of 4, smiling into the camera. And there, in the background, was the motel sign. The same piercing blue eyes from the man at the motel stared back at her, and she realized with a jolt that she recognized the woman in the picture. It was her. Her world tilted on its axis as she tried to process the impossibility of what she was seeing. The GPS beeped again, its screen displaying a message she had never seen before. Welcome home. Sarah stumbled out of the house, her mind racing. The truck pulled into the clearing, the engine rumbling like a living beast. The driver stepped out, the same man from the motel, his smile now a grim line. You've been looking for a way out, haven't you? He said, his eyes gleaming. But you can't leave until you face what you're running from. Sarah standing in the rain, the house and the truck fading away, leaving her in the middle of the forest. The GPS, now silent, showed a blinking dot, a single point of light in a sea of darkness. The screen read calculating route. The camera pulls back, revealing the endless expanse of the woods, the road behind her disappearing into the trees. The question lingers in the air. What secrets does the forest hold? And what will it take for Sarah to find her way out of this never-ending detour? Sarah's car rolled to a halt in front of the Welcome Inn, the headlights casting a ghostly pallor on the peeling, mint green paint of the signboard. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, and the fog was beginning to lift, revealing a clearing in the otherwise oppressive forest. The motel looked like a relic from another era, with its retro neon lights flickering erratically and the red-tiled roof sagging under the weight of time. She glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the persistent truck's headlights piercing the gloom. But the road behind her was empty, swallowed by the forest's embrace. Her heart thumped in her chest as she stepped out of the car and into the damp night. The motel's vacancy sign blinked in the silence, a solitary beacon in the vast sea of darkness. She gathered her luggage and hurried towards the office, the clack of her heels echoing through the empty parking lot. The door was unlocked, and she pushed it open, stepping into a space that smelled faintly of mildew and stale cigarette smoke. The office was a time capsule from the 70s, with a counter separating her from a room filled with dusty furniture and a flickering TV set. The bell above the door jingled as it closed, sending a shiver down her spine. She coughed lightly, calling out, "Hello." The only response was the distant hum of the ancient refrigerator in the corner. Behind the counter, she found a guest book, its pages thick with dust. The last entry was dated 3 years prior, and she wondered if the motel was truly abandoned. She shrugged off the feeling of unease and approached the bell, giving it a firm ring. The sound was lost in the stale air, and she waited, her breath misting the glass pane that separated her from the adjoining room. As she waited, she couldn't shake the image of the truck driver from her mind. His friendly wave had seemed genuine, but his eyes had held a glint of something she couldn't quite place. A warning bell chimed in her head, but fatigue and the desire for a warm bed won out. The door to the office creaked open, and a figure ambled in, his silhouette backlit by the neon glow outside. Sarah's grip tightened on her purse, but as the man stepped into the room, she recognized him as the truck driver from the road. His drenched raincoat was slung over his broad shoulders, and his eyes searched the room, finally settling on her. "Hello, miss," he drawled, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You lost." Sarah took a step back, trying to maintain a friendly facade. "I'm just looking for a room. Is this place open?" The man, who introduced himself as Joe, nodded slowly. "Last one for the night, but I got just the room for you." His voice had a strange quality to it, as if it didn't quite fit his body. He stepped behind the counter and pulled out an ancient key from a board filled with numbered hooks. "Room 13. It's our best one. Just down the hall, first on the left." Her eyes widened slightly at the mention of the notorious room number, but she brushed it off as mere coincidence. "Thank you," she murmured, taking the key. As she made her way down the dimly lit hallway, the floorboards groaned beneath her feet, sending shivers down her spine. The air grew colder, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She found room 13. The door a sickly shade of yellow, with the number 13 hanging askew. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was small but clean, with a single queen-sized bed, a nightstand, an ATV that looked like it hadn't been turned on in decades. The bathroom was a tiny rectangle of peeling wallpaper and a cracked porcelain tub. She set her luggage by the bed and took a deep, calming breath. The TV flickered to life, and she screamed, jumping back. The static coalesced into an image of the road she'd been driving on, the rain pounding against the windshield. Sarah's heart raced as she stared at the screen, watching her own car wind through the trees. The scene switched to a blurry shot of the motel's office, the bell on the counter ringing faintly. Her breath hitched in her throat as the door to the office swung open, and Joe's figure filled the screen. His smile was gone, replaced by a look of intense focus. He began to speak, but his words were garbled, lost in the static. "Hello, Sarah," the TV whispered, the voice eerily clear despite the visual distortion. "Welcome to the welcome-in." Sarah backed away, her hand fumbling for the power button. The TV clicked off, and she stared at it, her heart pounding in her ears. Was it just an old recording? A trick of the mind? Or was it something more sinister? A knock at the door made her jump. "Room service," Joe called from the other side. Her stomach lurched, and she debated whether to answer. Finally, she gathered her courage and opened the door a crack. The hallway was empty. No Joe. No one at all. Confused and scared, she stepped back into the room and locked the door, pushing the dresser in front of it for good measure. She pulled out her phone, but there was no signal. She was truly alone. Exhaustion pulled at her, and she climbed into bed, her eyes darting around the room. The clock on the nightstand ticked away the minutes, each second stretching into an eternity. She closed her eyes, willing herself to drift off. The bed dipped slightly, and she bolted upright, her eyes snapping open. The room was pitch black, the only light coming from the glow of the neon sign outside her window. She heard the rustle of fabric and felt a hand on her shoulder. "Shh," Joe's voice whispered in her ear. "You're safe here." Her scream was muffled by a hand over her mouth, and she was dragged from the bed. She kicked and struggled, her eyes searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her hand closed around the heavy lamp on the nightstand, and she swung it with all her might, connecting with something solid. The grip on her loosened, and she stumbled towards the door, fumbling with the dresser. It crashed to the floor, and she sprinted into the hallway, her heart racing. The motel was a maze of identical doors, and she didn't know where to turn. She heard footsteps behind her, growing louder with each passing second. Panic set in, and she dashed down the stairs, the wood groaning under her weight. In the office, she found a phone, but it was dead. The door was locked from the inside, and she could see Joe's silhouette approaching through the window. She had to find another way out. Her eyes fell on a dusty keyring hanging on the wall, labeled emergency exit. She grabbed it and dashed towards the back of the motel, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The emergency exit led to a narrow alley, the forest looming ominously beyond. The door was rattling, Joe's fists pounding against it. She had seconds. Sarah burst through the exit and into the alley, the cold air hitting her like a slap in the face. She didn't stop to look back, pushing herself to run faster than she ever had before. Rain-slicked leaves slapped against her skin as she sprinted into the forest, her eyes searching for a path, any path, that would lead her away from the motel. The forest grew denser, the trees closer together, their branches grasping at her as she passed. The sound of her pursuer grew fainter, but she didn't dare slow down. Finally, she stumbled onto a clearing, the moon casting a silver beam through the clouds. In the center stood a dilapidated house, its windows like hollow eyes staring at her. Her instincts screamed at her to keep running, but she was out of breath, her legs trembling. She ducked inside, slamming the door shut behind her and barricading it with a rotting chair. The house was a tomb, the air thick with the scent of decay. She searched the rooms, finding nothing but cobwebs and shadows. Her heart pounded in her chest as she climbed the stairs, her hand sliding along the banister. In the attic, she found a small window, just large enough for her to squeeze through. With trembling hands, she pushed it open, the cold air rushing in. The sound of the motel door smashing open reached her ears, and she knew she had no choice. She climbed onto the windowsill and squeezed through the opening, dropping into the wet grass outside. The house groaned in the wind, and she took off, running blindly through the forest. She didn't know where she was going, but anywhere was better than here. The trees grew thicker, and she stumbled over roots and rocks, her feet slipping in the mud. A hand closed around her ankle, and she screamed, kicking and thrashing. "Let go!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the trees. The hand released her, and she stumbled forward, her heart racing. But she didn't get far before she felt the ground give way beneath her. As the cold earth swallowed her up, she realized she had fallen into a pit, its sides slick with rain. She clawed at the sides, trying to climb out, but they were too steep. Her eyes searched the darkness, and she spotted a faint light, a glow that grew brighter with each passing moment. The light grew closer, and she made out the shape of Joe's face, twisted into a grin that was more predator than man. He was standing at the edge of the pit, holding a flashlight. "Welcome to the welcome inn," he said again, his voice a chilling whisper. The light grew brighter, and she realized it wasn't a flashlight. It was the headlights of his truck, descending towards her like the eyes of a monster. Sarah trapped in the pit, the truck's headlights bearing down on her, and Joe standing above, his intentions now terrifyingly clear. The sound of the engine grows louder, the light blinding, leaving viewers to wonder what horrors await her in the depths of the forest. The rain had not relented since Sarah had first ventured off the main road. Now, her clothes clung to her like a second skin, her shoes squelching with every step she took back towards her car. The forest had swallowed the welcome inn, if it had never been there, leaving her standing at the same intersection she had seen before, with the same crooked sign pointing her back into the dense foliage. But she knew better than to trust her eyes. Her heart hammered in her chest, a cacophony of fear and disbelief. The motel had been so real, the truck driver's presence so palpable. Yet here she was, in the same place she had been hours ago, as if her harrowing escape had been nothing but a nightmare. But the cold, damp air and the tremble in her hands were all too real. Her GPS remained obstinate, displaying the same non-existent route she had been following since she first entered the forest. The screen flickered, and the same disembodied voice echoed through the speakers. "Proceed to the route." Ignoring the device, she turned the ignition and set off down the road that should have led her to civilization. The tires hissed against the wet asphalt, and she clutched the steering wheel tightly, willing the car to move faster despite the treacherous conditions. The eerie quiet of the forest gave way to the distant murmur of traffic, a sound that grew louder and more reassuring with every mile. As she emerged from the trees, the fog lifted to reveal a sprawling cityscape, lights twinkling like a sea of stars. The stark contrast to the desolate road she had been traveling on for what felt like an eternity was almost overwhelming. Sarah's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, expecting to see the truck's headlights piercing the gloom. But there was nothing, only the rain. Her car's engine rumbled to life as she drove into the heart of the city, the buildings growing taller and more ominous with every block. She pulled into a gas station, the neon lights of the convenience store casting a warm glow across her shivering form. The attendant, a middle-aged man with a greasy cap, looked at her with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You okay, miss?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Sarah nodded, trying to compose herself. "I think I just had a weird experience." He leaned closer, his eyes sparkling with the promise of a good story. "Oh, you don't say." The warmth of the gas station was a stark contrast to the cold she had left behind. She bought a cup of coffee, the heat seeping through the styrofoam and into her trembling hands. She took a sip, the bitter liquid burning a path down her throat, grounding her in reality. "You know, there's an old motel out that way," the attendant said, gesturing back towards the forest. The Welcome Inn, or at least that's what it used to be called. It's been closed for years, though. Some say it's haunted. Her blood ran cold. What happened there? The man leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. People would check in and never check out. Some say they just vanished into thin air. The cops looked into it, but they never found nothing, just closed it down and said it was unsafe. Can't say I blame em. Her mind raced with the implications of his words. Could it be true? Had she stumbled upon some sort of supernatural trap? She decided to find out. Sarah pulled into the city's library. The grandeur of the building a stark contrast to the dilapidated motel she had just left behind. The librarian, a stoic woman with a penchant for cardigans and sensible shoes, looked up from her desk as Sarah approached. "I'm looking for information on the Welcome Inn," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I heard it was closed due to some incidents." The librarian's eyes narrowed. "Ah, yes, the old motel on the edge of the forest. It's quite the local legend." She led Sarah to a dusty corner of the building, where a few tattered newspaper clippings and a small book titled The Vanishing Act lay waiting. The book spoke of a series of unexplained disappearances dating back decades, all linked to the motel. Families on vacation, weary travelers, they had all disappeared without a trace. The article spoke of strange occurrences, lights flickering, doors locking from the inside, and the eerie sound of children playing when there were none to be seen. The motel's history was a tapestry of tragedy and mystery, with each disappearance adding a new thread to the grim pattern. The most recent article was from 5 years ago, detailing the disappearance of a young couple who had decided to explore the abandoned building. The city's archives yielded more information, though much of it was just as cryptic. The motel had changed hands multiple times, each owner claiming the same eerie experiences before abandoning the place. Plans to renovate had always fallen through, the investors pulling out at the last moment, citing strange happenings and ominous warnings. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She read through the accounts. Each story ended the same way, with no answers and a trail that grew cold as quickly as it had begun. The rain had let up by the time she left the library, the city now shrouded in a gentle mist. She drove back to the forest, her headlights cutting through the gloom. The motel's sign was gone, replaced by a new one that read "Do Not Enter." A chain and padlock secured the rusted gates, a silent sentinel against the curious. Sarah stepped out of her car, the damp earth beneath her feet. The motel loomed before her, a silent witness to the untold horrors it had seen. Her hand hovered over the lock, her heart racing. The moment she stepped through the gates, the air grew thick with an unsettling energy. The once white paint on the motel's facade had peeled away, revealing the rotted wood beneath. She approached the office, the door swinging open with an eerie creak. Inside, the smell of mildew and decay filled her nostrils. The room was exactly as she had left it, the desk cluttered with the same dusty knickknacks and outdated travel brochures. The bell on the counter chimed softly, as if welcoming a long-lost guest. Her eyes fell upon a photograph, yellowed with age. It was a group picture of a family standing in front of the motel. She recognized the man at the center as the truck driver from her encounter. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Sarah's investigation led her to the local sheriff's office, where she relayed her story. The skeptical officers took her statement, their eyes glazed over with the same look she had seen in the librarian's eyes. They had heard it all before. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah became a local fixture, piecing together the puzzle of the Welcome Inn. She spoke to former employees, locals who had seen strange lights in the night, and even a psychic who claimed the motel was a thin place, where the veil between worlds was at its thinnest. One stormy night, she received an anonymous call, the voice on the other end barely audible. "If you want answers, you need to find room 13. Her heart skipped a beat. Room 13 didn't exist on any of the motel's blueprints or records. It was a rumor, a myth whispered among those who dared to speak of the motel's dark past. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and her determination, Sarah returned to the Welcome Inn. The storm raged around her, lightning illuminating the desolate parking lot in brief, stark flashes. The door to room 13 stood before her, the number barely visible beneath layers of grime. She took a deep breath and pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the room was untouched, as if waiting for its next unsuspecting visitor. In the corner, she found a hidden panel, and beyond it, a staircase leading down into the bowels of the motel. The air grew colder, the walls closing in around her as she descended into the darkness. The basement was a labyrinth of corridors, the walls lined with doors, each with a nameplate that seemed to call out to her. The forgotten, the lost, the condemned. At the end of the hall, she found what she had been searching for, a door with no name, just a single, flickering light bulb above it. Her hand trembled as she turned the knob. The room was small, filled with a dense fog that made it difficult to see. In the center, a mirror stood, its surface rippling like water. As she approached, the reflection grew clearer, and she saw not her own face, but the truck driver's. His eyes met hers, and she realized with a start that he was not the monster she had feared, but a victim, trapped in this purgatory, forever reliving the moment he had arrived at the motel. The fog grew denser, and the room grew colder still. A chilling wind howled through the corridor, and she heard the distant sound of laughter. The door to the room slammed shut, the lock clicking into place. In that moment, she understood. The welcome inn was not just a place of darkness, but a prison, holding the lost souls who had stumbled upon it. And now, she was one of them. The walls began to close in, the air thick with the screams of the trapped. Sarah pounded on the door, her voice joining the cacophony. But as the room grew smaller, the laughter grew louder. She realized that she had become part of the motel's grim narrative. The scene ends with the sound of her fists against the door, the echo of her screams, and the haunting whisper of the motel's name. Welcome in. The rain had stopped, leaving the world bathed in a ghostly mist that clung to the trees like a shroud. Sarah stepped out of her car, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the welcome inn, the motel that had haunted her thoughts since her encounter with the truck driver. The city she had stumbled upon seemed too vibrant, too alive to be connected to the silent, decaying place she had fled from. Yet, as she spoke to the locals, the whispers grew louder, hinting at a dark past lurking beneath the gleaming facade of urban sprawl. Her first stop was the local library, a bastion of knowledge that held the secrets of the town's history. The librarian, a kind-faced woman with a knowing twinkle in her eye, listened to Sarah's story with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Ah, the old welcome inn," she murmured, her voice echoing through the hushed aisles. "You've stumbled upon quite the local legend, my dear." Sarah's heart raced as the woman led her to a dusty corner, where a collection of old newspaper clippings and yellowed books chronicled the motel's grisly past. Stories of ancient rituals, vengeful spirits, and the motel's notorious owner, Mr. Castellanos, sent shivers down her spine. The librarian spoke of the land's original inhabitants, a tribe whose sacred grounds were desecrated by the construction of the motel. It was said that their anger had manifested in the form of malevolent spirits that had claimed the lives of those who had dared to set foot on their hallowed earth. The tales grew more harrowing with each page she turned. A young couple found dead in their room, their faces twisted in agony. A traveler who disappeared without a trace, his possessions untouched. The motel had closed its doors decades ago, yet the whispers of its haunting lingered, passed from one generation to the next. Armed with the weight of this newfound knowledge, Sarah sought out the town's oldest residents. Each one spoke of the motel with a shiver, recounting stories that grew more chilling with each retelling. An old man with trembling hands spoke of a night he had spent there as a child, his family lost on a road trip. He remembered waking to find his mother standing in the doorway, her eyes glazed over, whispering to an unseen presence. "They took her," he said, his voice a mere breath. Never saw her again. The former employees she found were even more elusive, their eyes dark with memories they wished to forget. The housekeeper spoke of hearing the cries of children in the walls, the night manager of seeing shadowy figures in the lobby, always just out of the corner of his eye. Yet, it was the story of a young waitress that truly chilled her to the bone. "Mr. Castellanos," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He was a peculiar man, always to himself. "But I saw things that didn't sit right. Guests would check in, never to be seen again. And the whispers, oh, the whispers in the forest at night." With the sun dipping below the horizon, Sarah drove back to the spot where the motel should have been. The forest had swallowed it whole, leaving only a trace of the asphalt that had once been the motel's driveway. She stepped into the woods, her flashlight casting eerie shadows across the damp ground. The trees loomed above her, whispering ancient secrets that only the night could hear. The air grew colder. The whispers grew louder. She pushed on, her footsteps muffled by the carpet of leaves and decay. And there it was, nestled in a clearing, the Welcome Inn. The neon sign flickered to life, casting a sickly glow across the cracked, peeling facade. The door creaked open as if beckoning her, inviting her back into the embrace of the unknown. Inside, the motel was a museum of forgotten lives. The lobby was a tableau of dust and decay. The cobwebs were the only guests that remained, and they clung to the faded wallpaper like ghosts of a bygone era. She made her way to the office, her heart pounding in her chest. The truck driver's face loomed in her mind, a spectre of the horror she had narrowly escaped. The room was untouched, the calendar on the wall still set to the day the motel closed. Sarah's eyes fell upon a book hidden in the corner, its pages brittle with age. It was a journal belonging to Mr. Castellanos. His spidery handwriting spoke of his dark obsession with the forest spirits, his belief that he could harness their power for his own gain. The whispers grew into a cacophony as she read on, the pages filled with incantations and macabre drawings. The realization dawned on her that she was not just a weary traveler, but an integral part of a much larger, sinister narrative. The spirits had been waiting for her, luring her in with the malfunctioning GPS and the persistent truck driver. Her phone rang, shattering the silence. It was the sheriff, a man she had spoken to earlier in the day. His voice was urgent. "Miss, you need to leave that place, now." Ignoring his warning, Sarah continued her descent into the motel's history. Each room she entered was a snapshot of tragedy, a silent testament to the lives claimed by the vengeful spirits. The whispers grew stronger, the presence more palpable. In the last room, she found a hidden door, leading to a subterranean chamber. The earthy scent of the forest was overpowering, and the whispers grew to a fever pitch. At the center of the room stood an ancient stone altar, stained with the residue of unspeakable rituals. The whispers grew into voices, speaking in a language she couldn't understand, but somehow knew was meant for her. They called her name, beckoning her to complete the ritual that Castellanos had started. She felt an unseen force tugging at her, urging her to submit to its will. But Sarah was not easily swayed. Summoning her courage, she spoke aloud. "I am not one of you. I am not here to harm or to be harmed. I seek only to understand." The voices fell silent. The air grew still. And then, a single whisper, clear as a bell, echoed through the chamber. "We are the guardians of the forest. Heed our warning. Leave this place and never return." Sarah stumbled back to the surface, her mind racing. The motel was a prison for these tormented spirits, trapped by Castellanos' greed. They had tried to protect her, to save her from the fate that had befallen so many others. In the motel's office, she found the truck driver's logbook. It contained no records of deliveries or destinations, only a series of dates and names. Each name matched a story she had read in the newspaper clippings, a chilling confirmation of the motel's grisly history. The whispers grew fainter as she approached her car, the forest seemingly satisfied with her discovery. She knew she had to leave, to carry the truth of the Welcome Inn back to the world beyond the mist. As she drove away, the motel faded from view, leaving only the echo of its whispers in her mind. Sarah's journey had led her to a place where reality and legend intertwined, a place where the dead still held sway over the living. In the following days, Sarah's investigation led to the reopening of the cold cases, and the town was forced to confront the ghosts of its past. The motel was torn down, the land reclaimed by the forest. Yet, the whispers remained, a haunting reminder of the price paid for disturbing the slumber of ancient spirits. The final scene of the episode fades to black, the whispers of the forest a distant echo. But as the credits begin to roll, a single frame lingers, a hint of the motel's sign, flickering in the night. The whispers, it seems, are not quite ready to be silenced. The series The Haunting of the Welcome Inn had come to a close, but the story of Sarah and the forest's whispers had only just begun. Her life forever changed. She knew she would never be free of the motel's grip. Yet, as she lay in her bed at home, the whispers grew faint, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves outside her window. Perhaps, she thought, the spirits had found peace in the quiet embrace of the forest once more. Or perhaps, they were merely waiting, biding their time, until the next weary traveler stumbled upon their path. The rain had finally ceased, leaving behind a misty shroud that clung to the city streets like a lover's whisper. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she stared at the yellowed map spread out on the motel room's rickety table. Her trembling fingers traced the intricate web of ancient paths that snaked through the modern world, invisible to all but those who knew where to look. The map was a relic, a cryptic testament to a time when the veil between the mortal realm and the spirit world was thinner, more permeable. Her investigation had led her to this moment, piecing together the shattered whispers of the forgotten. The Welcome Inn was not just a relic of a bygone era, but a gateway to a realm where lost souls and malevolent entities lurked. As she studied the map, the weight of her discovery grew heavier. The map, which she had found in the dusty attic of the local library, was hand-drawn with meticulous detail. It depicted a series of interwoven trails that mirrored the layout of the modern highway system, hinting at a time when the world was a different place, governed by ancient laws and fearsome gods. The paths were marked with symbols that she could not decipher, but she knew they pointed to places of power and darkness. The motel room was a stark contrast to the bright lights and bustling streets outside. The wallpaper peeled, revealing layers of time and neglect. The bedspread was a faded floral pattern, and the carpet was stained with the whispers of 1,000 untold stories. Sarah's reflection in the mirror was haunted, her eyes wide with the knowledge she had gathered. Her journey had started with a simple job interview and had morphed into an odyssey through a nightmare she could not wake from. The truck driver, the Eerie motel, the vanishing road, it all led back to these ancient paths. With a deep breath, she folded the map and tucked it into her pocket. The clock on the nightstand ticked away the moments, each second a countdown to the inevitable. She knew she had to face the truth hidden in the forest's embrace. The sun had barely crested the horizon when she set out, her car's headlights piercing the lingering fog. The road was wet and slick, the trees looming like sentinels over the asphalt. The GPS on her phone was useless, as if the very air was thick with the spirits of the past, shielding their secrets from modern intrusion. Sarah pulled over at the spot where she had first seen the Welcome Inn sign. The forest looked different in the light of day, less foreboding and more inviting, but she knew better. The whispers of the city had painted a picture of unspeakable horrors lurking in the shadows, waiting for the unsuspecting to stumble upon them. The map in her hand felt like a beacon, guiding her through the dense underbrush. The trees grew closer together, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The forest floor was a tapestry of vibrant moss and ferns, but she could see the faint trace of a path beneath the carpet of leaves. As she walked, the sounds of the modern world grew distant. The hum of traffic, the murmur of civilization, all faded away, replaced by the symphony of the natural world. Birds called to one another, their melodies echoing through the trees. The rustle of small animals foraging in the underbrush seemed to whisper secrets that only they knew. The path grew steeper, the trees taller, and the shadows deeper. The map led her to a clearing, where the ancient path converged with the modern world. There, she found a ring of stones, each one etched with the same cryptic symbols that adorned the map. At the center of the circle was a gnarled tree, its branches twisted into grotesque shapes that seemed almost alive. Her hand hovered over the stones, feeling the cold, damp surface. The air grew colder, and she could almost see her breath. The whispers grew louder, and she realized they weren't just the wind in the leaves. They were voices, faint and distant, crying out for help, for release. Her heart pounding, Sarah stepped into the stone circle. The moment her foot touched the sacred ground, the world around her shimmered, and she was no longer in the present. The forest grew denser, the light dimmer, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and fear. Before her stood the Welcome Inn, not the dilapidated structure she had encountered, but a gleaming bastion of hospitality. The neon sign buzzed to life, casting an eerie glow across the clearing. The doors swung open, and the truck driver stepped out, his smile as welcoming as it was terrifying. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. Sarah's mind raced. She knew she had to find a way to save the souls trapped in this place, to put an end to the cycle of fear and despair. But how? The truck driver beckoned her closer, his eyes gleaming with a malicious delight. "You're just like the others," he whispered, "lost, searching for something you'll never find." But Sarah was not like the others. She had the map, the key to the lost realm. With a burst of courage, she pulled it from her pocket and unfolded it before him. "You can't have me," she said, her voice firm. "I know the way out." The driver's smile faltered, and for a moment, she saw the fear in his eyes. He lunged at her, but she was quicker. She stepped aside, and he stumbled through the archway of the motel, disappearing into the swirling mists of the other realm. The door to the motel swung shut with a bang, the sound echoing through the forest. The path before her grew brighter, the ancient symbols on the map pulsing with an unearthly light. She knew she had to follow it, to find the end of the trail and the truth behind the whispers. The path grew narrower, the trees closing in around her. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of pain and sorrow. The air grew colder still, and she could see her breath in puffs of white. The ground beneath her feet grew spongy, the scent of decay stronger with every step. Finally, she reached the heart of the path. A clear pool of water lay before her, the surface undisturbed, reflecting the canopy of leaves above. The map fluttered in her hand, the light from the symbols growing brighter. The whispers grew to a crescendo, and she knew she had arrived. Sarah knelt beside the pool, her reflection rippling with the power of the ancient pathways. She whispered the words she had read in the library's dusty tomes, the incantation to free the lost souls. The water grew still, and she could see them, faces pressed against the surface, desperate for escape. The spirits surged forth, a torrent of light and emotion that filled the air around her. They flowed into the map, the symbols absorbing their energy. The map grew warm in her hand, the ink pulsing with life. As the last spirit passed through the barrier, the air grew still. The motel and the forest faded away, leaving her standing on the side of the road. The welcome inn sign lay broken in the underbrush, the motel a distant memory. Sarah knew she had done something profound, something that would change her forever. She looked at the map in her hand, now a simple piece of paper, its secrets and power spent. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the forest. The whispers of the lost had been silenced, and the darkness lifted. She folded the map and placed it in her pocket, her journey complete. As she drove away, the tension of the night began to melt away. The road was familiar now, no longer a labyrinth of fear, but a path of understanding. The GPS on her phone chirped back to life, guiding her to the next turn. But she ignored it, choosing instead to follow the path laid out before her, the road not taken. The final scene shows Sarah driving into the sunrise, the map's legacy etched into her soul. She had faced the unknown and emerged transformed, ready to face whatever the world had in store for her next. Sarah woke up with a start, the sun peeking through the curtains of her cheap motel room, a bustling city. The previous night's rain had washed away the fog of the forest, but not the memories of her encounter with the phantom truck driver. She stared at the ceiling, the weight of the unexplained heavy on her chest. Her mind raced with the chilling stories of the welcome inn she had uncovered during her research. Despite the warnings and the urging of her rational self, to leave well enough alone. She felt an inexplicable pull to return to the place that had so deeply disturbed her. The morning light cast a glow over the city as she gathered her things and set out on the road again. The GPS on her phone remained silent, as if it had given up on her. With the forgotten map spread out on the passenger seat, she navigated the winding streets with a mix of excitement and dread. The urban sprawl eventually gave way to the familiar stretch of deserted highway she had traveled days before. The forest loomed in the distance, its dense foliage whispering secrets in the breeze. As she approached the spot where she had turned off the main road, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She slowed down, expecting to find the overgrown path to the welcome inn, but it was nowhere to be seen. Sarah double-checked the map, her heart racing. The spot where she had encountered the motel was marked with a symbol she didn't recognize, a hand with an eye in its palm. Just as she was about to drive away, a figure emerged from the shadows of the trees. A young girl, drenched in the dew of the morning, waved at her. Sarah rolled down the window, and the girl's sweet voice pierced the silence. "Excuse me, Mum, are you looking for the welcome inn?" Sarah was taken aback. "How do you know about that place?" The girl, who introduced herself as Lily, spoke with a knowing smile. "I've lived around here all my life. It's hard to miss a place that gives everyone the creeps." Sarah's curiosity piqued. She decided to trust the girl. "Can you take me there?" Lily nodded and climbed into the car, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and mischief. As they drove, she spoke of the motel's dark history, her voice a melody of innocence and ancient wisdom. "They say it was built on sacred ground, a place where the veil between worlds is thinner. The spirits didn't take kindly to the construction. They say it's why people started disappearing." The car jolted as they turned onto a barely discernible dirt path, and the forest swallowed them whole. The trees grew denser, the air grew colder, and the silence was deafening. The GPS remained silent, as if it had been swallowed by the void of the forgotten road. The forest grew denser. The sun's light filtered through the thick canopy in a way that painted the scene in an eerie green hue. The air grew colder, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. The path grew narrower, and the trees closed in around them, their branches like gnarled fingers reaching out to snatch at the car. As they drove deeper into the woods, the road grew more treacherous. The car bumped and jolted over hidden rocks and dips, the underbrush scraping against the doors. The silence was broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath the tires and the occasional hoot of an owl. "Is it much farther?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Lily's smile never wavered. "We're almost there." The trees parted, and through the gap, Sarah could see the dilapidated sign of the welcome inn. It hung at a crooked angle, the neon lights flickering erratically. The sight sent a shiver down her spine. They parked in the motel's gravel lot, which was just as desolate as it had been when she first arrived. The office looked the same, the paint peeling, the door hanging slightly ajar. "Stay here," she told Lily, grabbing her flashlight and stepping out of the car. Sarah approached the office with trepidation, the door creaking open to reveal the same dusty, cluttered room she had fled from days before. She stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet. The stale scent of cobwebs and mildew filled her nose. The room was a time capsule, untouched since the last time she had been there. Her eyes searched the room, landing on the ancient computer that had held the key to her escape. The screen was still on, the cursor blinking ominously. She approached it and typed in the words "Welcome in" into the search bar. The screen flickered before displaying a single message: "You should not have come back." Her heart racing, she spun around to find Lily standing in the doorway, her eyes no longer innocent, but ancient and knowing. "You're not from around here, are you?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily's smile grew wider. "I am from the very place you're searching for." The girl's words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "What do you mean?" "The motel," Lily replied, her eyes shimmering. "It's a gateway to the spirit world. And you, my dear, have been summoned." Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder, and she spun around to face the truck driver from her nightmares. His eyes were hollow, his smile menacing. "You shouldn't have ignored the signs," he rasped. Panic set in, and she bolted from the office, her heart pounding in her chest. She sprinted towards her car, her eyes searching for an escape. But the forest had changed. The trees had moved closer, the path out had vanished, and the only way was back through the motel. As she darted through the rows of dilapidated motel rooms, each door she passed revealed scenes of horror from the past. Guests frozen in time, trapped in moments of terror, their eyes pleading for a help that never came. She could hear the whispers of the lost souls, their cries echoing through the corridors. The truck driver's heavy footsteps grew louder, his shadow looming over her. Sarah stumbled into a room at the end of the row, slammed the door shut, unlocked it. She caught her breath, her eyes scanning the room for anything she could use to protect herself. In the corner, she found a dusty book titled The Lost Paths. Her trembling hands turned the pages, and she discovered that the hand with an eye on the map was a symbol of protection. It was a talisman used to navigate the spirit world. With newfound resolve, she pressed the hand-shaped talisman into her palm and stepped out of the room, facing the truck driver and Lily, who now floated above the ground, her eyes ablaze with an otherworldly light. "You're not taking me without a fight," Sarah declared, raising the flashlight as if it were a sword. Lily's smile softened. "You're not meant to fight us, Sarah. You're meant to join us." The tension grew thick. Sarah searched for a way to escape, but the more she struggled, the more the motel shifted around her, the walls closing in, the floor beneath her becoming a swirling vortex of darkness. Suddenly, the air was pierced by the sound of an ancient chant. The world around her grew brighter, and the spirits in the motel grew restless. A figure emerged from the shadows, an old woman with a kind face. She spoke in a language Sarah didn't understand, but the words filled her with peace. The old woman approached Lily, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You've done enough, child. It's time to let her go." Lily's eyes dimmed, and she nodded. The truck driver vanished, and the motel began to fade away. The old woman turned to Sarah, her hand outstretched. "You have the gift of sight. Use it wisely." Sarah took the woman's hand, and together they stepped into the light. The motel and the forest disappeared, leaving them standing on the edge of a vast, untouched meadow. The sky was a canvas of stars, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers. The old woman spoke again, her voice like the rustle of leaves. "The paths you walk are no longer your own. You have been chosen as a guide for those who are lost. Use your gift to help them find their way home." Sarah looked back at the woman, her mind racing with questions, but the figure was gone, leaving only the soft rustling of the grass in the night breeze. She was standing on the side of the highway, the welcoming sign a mere memory in the distance. The sun had set, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Sarah climbed back into her car, the map now a faded memory. As she drove away, she felt a strange sense of purpose. The road ahead was long and fraught with danger, but she knew she was no longer alone. The spirits of the lost would be her companions, and she would be their beacon in the dark. The final scene showed Sarah driving into the sunset, her eyes on the horizon. The camera panned out to reveal the hidden paths of the spirit world, crisscrossing the modern roadways, invisible to all but those with the gift of sight. The rain had abated to a gentle patter as Sarah approached the notorious intersection where her nightmare had begun. The neon sign of the Welcome Inn flickered ominously through the mist, a beacon of dread in the heart of the desolate woods. She had come full circle, armed not with weapons, but with the knowledge that had been pieced together through whispers and forgotten lore. Her journey had started as a simple detour from a routine life, a solitary vacation to clear her mind after a particularly taxing job interview. Now, it had turned into a quest to unravel the mystery that had engulfed her, a quest that had led her down a path of ancient terrors and unspeakable secrets. As she stepped out of her car, the air grew thick with anticipation. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that held the secrets of the night. The gravel crunched beneath her feet, echoing through the silence that had swallowed the world. The motel's vacant parking lot was a sea of shadows, the only light coming from the dim glow of the sign and the flickering bulb above the office door. The door to the office creaked open, revealing the same musty scent that had greeted her on her first visit. Behind the counter, she found the guest book, its pages yellowed with time and damp. She thumbed through the entries, finding her own hastily scribbled name from weeks ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. Her gaze drifted to the stairs, the path to her room, where she had encountered the truck driver. The same room where she had felt the unseen presence. The room that had been her temporary sanctuary before the nightmare had unfolded. With a steely resolve, she climbed the stairs, each step echoing like a warning through the empty corridor. Room 12, the door slightly ajar, beckoned her with a cold, malevolent force. She pushed it open and stepped inside, her heart racing. The bed was unmade. The TV flickered with static, as if time had frozen the moment she had left. But she wasn't alone. The truck driver, the man with the kind eyes and sinister smile, stood by the window, his silhouette cast against the faded curtains. He turned to face her, and she could see the darkness within him, a darkness that had been festering for years. "You shouldn't have come back," he rasped, his voice a chilling blend of regret and anger. Sarah's hand trembled as she held up the map she had found, the one that detailed the ancient paths beneath the modern roads. "I know what this place is," she said, her voice steady. "I know about the rituals and the lost souls." He sneered, his eyes flickering with a malicious glee. "You think you can save them? You think you can save yourself? What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her resolve. "Justice," he replied, his voice echoing through the room. "You see, I was once like you, lost, looking for a way out. But this place, it doesn't let you leave, not without a price." The motel's walls seemed to close in around her, the very air thick with the weight of his words. She knew she had to find a way to end this cycle of fear and despair, and she knew that the key to her survival lay in the girl, Lily, who had guided her here. Sarah stepped back into the hallway, the floorboards groaning under her weight. The motel was a labyrinth of pain and suffering, each room holding the echoes of its former inhabitants' cries for help. The air grew colder as she approached the lobby, the once inviting fireplace, now a mere pile of ash and despair. In the corner, Lily sat, her eyes vacant and lost. "You found your way back," she said, her voice a mere whisper. "I knew you would." "What is this place?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Lily looked up, a ghostly smile playing on her lips. "This is where the lost find their end, and where the lost become the finders." The girl's words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She realized that Lily was one of the souls trapped here, a guide for the unfortunate travelers lured into the motel's clutches. "There's a way out," Lily continued, "but it's not for the faint of heart." The girl led her through the motel, each room revealing a new layer of horror. In one, a couple was forever frozen in a dance of death, their bodies contorted in agony. In another, a traveler was trapped in a mirror, his screams for help muffled by the glass. They arrived at the heart of the motel, a room hidden behind the reception desk. The door was sealed with ancient symbols, the air humming with energy. "What's in there?" Sarah asked, her hand hovering over the doorknob. "The source of the curse," Lily replied, "the one who started it all." With a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open. Inside, a figure loomed over an ancient altar, surrounded by candles and artifacts of dark power. The figure turned, and Sarah recognized the truck driver, but his eyes were now black pools of despair, his skin ashen and cold. "You found me," he hissed, his voice no longer human. "But you're too late." The room spun as the truth dawned on her. The truck driver was not the villain, but a victim. The true enemy was the motel itself, a living entity that fed on fear and despair. "We can end this," Lily whispered, her voice filled with hope. "Together." Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting the girl's. They had to find a way to free the trapped souls and break the cycle of torment. As they approached the altar, the air grew colder, the candles flickering with malevolent intent. The ritual was simple, yet profound. They had to give a piece of themselves to the motel, a piece of their essence, to appease the vengeful spirits. Sarah offered her fear, her doubt, her loneliness. And as she did, she felt a warmth spread through her. A warmth she hadn't felt in what felt like an eternity. The room trembled, the motel's very foundation shaking with the power of their shared sacrifice. The candles grew brighter, the room warming as the darkness receded. The spirits, once trapped, began to ascend, their whispers of gratitude a chorus of relief. The truck driver looked at her, his eyes clear once more. "Thank you," he murmured before fading away, leaving Sarah and Lily alone in the room. "You're free," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. Lily nodded. "But you can't stay. You have to leave before it's too late." With a heavy heart, Sarah followed Lily to the motel's exit. The girl handed her the keys to her car, the same keys she had lost in the rain. "Remember," she said, "the road is long, and the night is dark. But you're not alone." As Sarah stepped outside, the motel crumbled behind her, the ancient paths beneath the asphalt cracking open to swallow the building whole. The once terrifying woods now looked serene, the night sky clear and filled with stars. In the distance, she heard the faint sound of a truck's engine, a reminder of the journey she had endured. She climbed into her car, the engine roaring to life as she turned onto the road, leaving the haunting of Route 62 behind. The drive home was quiet, the only sound the rhythmic hum of the tires on the wet asphalt. But as she reached the city limits, she saw a young girl standing by the side of the road, her eyes filled with a silent plea for help. Sarah pulled over, her hand hovering over the door handle. Was this another lost soul? Another trap? The girl looked at her, her eyes filled with hope. "Are you lost?" she asked. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. "No," she said with a newfound strength. "I'm here to help you find your way." Sarah's transformation from a lost traveler to a beacon of hope for others trapped in the motel's grasp. Her journey has come full circle, but it's clear that the road ahead is filled with new challenges and the possibility of redemption. The haunting of Route 62 has left its mark on her, but she now carries the torch, ensuring that no one else has to face the darkness alone. The rain had ceased, but the fog remained, wrapping the forest in a thick, clammy embrace as Sarah stepped out of her car, her heart racing. The eerie silence was pierced only by the occasional hoot of an owl and the distant hum of the mysterious truck that had haunted her journey. The welcome inn loomed before her, its neon sign flickering like a dying ember in the moonless night. The motel looked exactly as it had before, yet somehow more sinister, as if the very fabric of reality had been twisted into a grim parody of itself. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the room key she had kept from her first encounter. It felt cold, almost metallic to the touch. The door creaked open, and she stepped into the musty embrace of the motel room, the floorboards groaning under her weight as if complaining of the disturbance. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay. The bedside clock ticked away the seconds, but the hands remained stubbornly fixed at 3:15 a.m., the same time she had seen during her previous stay. The TV flickered to life, the static whispering secrets she could almost understand. A sense of déjà vu washed over her, but she pushed it aside. She had come prepared this time, armed with a digital voice recorder, a camera, and a notebook filled with the chilling stories of the motel's past. She had interviewed the locals, uncovered archives, and even stumbled upon a tattered journal belonging to one of the missing employees. The information had painted a grim picture of ritualistic sacrifices and a malevolent spirit that consumed the lives of those who dared to stay in the cursed motel. Her first night back at the motel was a restless one. Time seemed to stretch and snap, moments elongating into eternities, only to be swallowed by sudden, disorienting jumps forward. She would blink, and hours would pass, the clock's hands inexplicably moving without the tick of the seconds to accompany them. The digital clock on her phone would reset to 3:15 a.m., only to show the correct time again moments later. Her thoughts grew jumbled, memories of her past blending with the horrors she had uncovered. Was she losing her grip on reality, or was the motel's sinister influence growing stronger? The following day, Sarah's investigation took a turn for the worse. The townsfolk she had spoken to had either forgotten her existence or claimed she had never been there. The archives she had sifted through were now pristine and untouched. Even the old woman who had shared the most about the motel's history denied knowing her. The only constant was the persistent presence of Lily, the young girl with the knowing eyes, who seemed to appear and vanish at will. "You shouldn't have come back," Lily murmured, her voice a spectral whisper in the fog. Sarah spun around, but the girl was nowhere to be seen. A shiver ran down her spine. She continued her search for answers, her path lit by the flickering glow of her flashlight. The motel's corridors twisted and turned, leading her in endless circles. She felt as if she were a rat in a maze, the walls closing in with every step. In her room, the TV static grew louder, the whispers more insistent. Sarah's reflection in the mirror looked haggard, her eyes sunken with dark circles. Her hand hovered over the power button, but something held her back. The whispers grew clearer, forming words that seemed to speak directly to her soul. "Find ... the ... key ... The camera in her hand grew hot, the digital display flickering erratically. The words nitrogen monoxide signal flashed before her eyes, and the screen went black. When she looked up again, the whispers had stopped, and the TV was nothing but a silent, inert box. Sarah's thoughts raced. What key? The one to the room? Or was it something more? Something she had missed? She rummaged through her notes, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and confusion. As she did, she noticed a peculiar entry in the old journal she had found, scribbled in a shaky hand. "The key to the realm of the lost lies beneath the shadow of the weeping willow." The weeping willow. It was the same tree she had seen on the abandoned property next to the motel. With newfound urgency, she dashed out into the fog, the damp earth squelching beneath her feet. The tree stood tall and mournful, its branches drooping under the weight of unshed hairs. At its base, she found a small, metal key, half buried in the soil. It gleamed with an unnatural light, beckoning her closer. Back in her room, she inserted the key into the TV's ancient VHS slot. The static grew to a deafening crescendo before dissipating, revealing a grainy home video. A family, smiling and happy, played in the motel's parking lot. Then, the image shifted to a group of hooded figures, their faces obscured, performing an ancient rite around the very tree she had just visited. Sarah's stomach lurched as she recognized the spot where she had found the key. It was the site of a long-forgotten burial ground, the final resting place of those claimed by the motel's curse. The video ended abruptly with the image of a girl, her eyes wide with terror, reaching out towards the camera. It was Lily. Her heart pounding, she stepped outside, the fog parting briefly to reveal the phantom truck parked in front of her room. The driver's door swung open, and she caught a glimpse of the truck's interior, a realm of shadow and decay, a gateway to the spirit world. Lily stood before her, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You have to stop him," she pleaded, her voice barely a breath. "He feeds on the lost." Sarah knew what she had to do. She climbed into the truck, the interior cold and unyielding. The driver's seat was empty, but she could feel the malevolent presence that lurked within. The key in her hand grew colder, pulsing with an ancient power. As she turned the key in the ignition, the world around her shifted. The motel and the forest melted away, replaced by a barren wasteland of twisted metal and shattered concrete. The spirit of the motel's driver, a hulking, faceless creature, loomed before her, its eyes burning with a hunger that was insatiable. They engaged in a battle of wills, the key a conduit for the anger and sorrow of the lost souls trapped within the motel. Sarah's determination grew stronger with each passing moment, fueled by her need to expose the truth and save herself from becoming one of the lost. The creature roared, its form flickering between the driver she had met and the monster beneath. It reached for her, but she was ready. With a cry of defiance, she yanked the key from the ignition, tearing a hole in the fabric of reality. The spirits of the lost surged forth, surrounding her in a blinding light. When the light faded, she found herself back in her room, the TV now silent, the motel outside restored to its abandoned state. The key lay on the floor, powerless. The motel had released her, but at what cost? Sarah packed her things, her mind a tumult of emotions. As she drove away, the motel grew smaller in her rearview mirror, the fog swallowing it whole once more. But she knew she couldn't leave without one final goodbye. "Thank you, Lily," she whispered, her voice carrying on the wind. "Rest now." The motel sign flickered a final time, the lights dimming before going out completely. The welcome inn was no more, a relic of a dark past, now buried with the spirits it had claimed. Months later, Sarah published her book on the motel's grisly history, bringing the truth to light. The town was torn apart by the revelations, but the road was closed, the motel buried under a new layer of asphalt. But every so often, on rainy nights, those who drove too close to the old Route 62 would swear they saw a flicker of neon, a ghostly reminder of the lost time that still haunts the forgotten paths beneath the modern world. And if they listen closely, they might just hear the faintest echo of a girl's laughter, finally free from the shackles of the welcome inn. The rain had stopped, but the moon remained a mere sliver in the sky, casting a pale glow over the deserted stretch of Route 62. Sarah's car, a tiny beacon of light in the vast sea of darkness, pulled up to the all-too-familiar welcome inn. She could almost feel the motel's presence, a heavy weight pressing down on her chest, whispering for her to stay away. Yet, she stepped out into the chilly night air, her resolve unshaken. The neon sign flickered ominously, its red glow dancing on the puddles beneath. The door to room 10, the epicenter of her nightmares, creaked open. A cold draft wove through the corridor, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. The floorboards groaned under her feet as she cautiously stepped inside, her flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The room looked unchanged, yet the very air felt charged with malice. Sarah's heart raced as she set up the devices she had brought to capture evidence of the supernatural. Her breaths grew shallow as she waited for the first sign of activity. Minutes stretched into hours, and she began to doubt her decision. Perhaps it was all in her head, a figment of her overactive imagination. Then, it started. The TV flickered to life, displaying static that grew louder until it was a deafening roar. The bed covers twisted and writhed as if alive. The lamp swung wildly, and the door to the bathroom slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the empty room. A chilling laugh pierced the silence, and the mirror above the dresser cracked, revealing a face that was not her own, the truck driver's. Panic set in, and she fled the room, her heart hammering in her chest. She stumbled into the corridor, the lights flickering as if alive. The walls shifted, the floor undulated like a carpet of snakes, and the once familiar layout of the motel morphed into a labyrinth of dread. The little girl, Lily, appeared around a corner, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "You shouldn't have come back," she murmured, her voice a chilling caress. "You're not meant to leave." Sarah tried to run, but her legs felt like lead. She stumbled, her hand brushing against the sticky, damp wallpaper. It was as if the motel itself was trying to hold her, to claim her as one of its lost souls. "Lily, help me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" Lily's smile grew wider, revealing teeth that were too sharp. "You're the one who wanted answers, Sarah, but some questions are better left unasked." The girl vanished, leaving Sarah to navigate the twisted halls alone. She pushed through the ever-changing landscape of the motel, her flashlight dimming with each step. In the office, she found a dusty journal belonging to the motel's original owner. It spoke of a pact made with a malevolent spirit, a creature of the ancient paths that promised prosperity in exchange for a steady stream of unsuspecting travelers. The owner had built the motel as a trap, luring the lost and weary to their doom. The motel had fed on their fear and pain, growing more powerful with each soul it claimed. And now, it had its sights set on her. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of an engine rumbling in the distance, the truck driver's truck, circling the motel like a predator. She knew she had to act fast. Gripping the journal tightly, she sought out the source of the malevolent energy. The motel grew colder, the air thick with an unearthly presence. She found herself in the basement, where the ancient path lay hidden beneath the concrete. The floor opened up before her, revealing a gaping maw of darkness. The spirit beckoned, its whispers promising her peace, a release from her fear. But Sarah had faced her fears and knew the truth. "I reject your pact," she shouted, flinging the journal into the abyss. "I'll never be one of your lost souls." The basement trembled, the very air around her seeming to boil. The spirit roared, and the motel began to crumble, the walls cracking and the ceiling collapsing in on itself. As she sprinted back to the room, the corridor grew narrower, the walls closing in. The spirit was angry, and it didn't want to let her go. Sarah reached the room, panting and disoriented. The door to the bathroom was open, and she could see the path to freedom, the path she had taken in her first visit, the one that had led her to this nightmare. With a final burst of strength, she leapt through the doorway, expecting to land on the wet asphalt outside. Instead, she found herself in a serene meadow, the sky above her clear and filled with stars. But she wasn't alone. The truck driver was there, his eyes burning with a fiery rage. "You think you can escape me?" he snarled. "No," she replied, standing tall. "But I can face you." The spirit within the driver lunged at her, but she was ready. Using the knowledge she had gained from the journal, she recited an incantation, a spell to banish the malevolence. The creature howled as it was torn from the driver's body, a writhing mass of shadow and anger. It grew smaller and smaller until it was nothing but a wisp, disappearing into the night. The truck driver, now a withered husk, collapsed to the ground, his eyes vacant. Exhausted, Sarah turned to leave the motel behind her. As she walked away, the building groaned and crumbled, swallowed by the earth, as if it had never been there. The city she had found so welcoming now felt like a prison. The people she had met, the clues she had gathered, all pointed to the motel's dark past. Yet, as she drove away, she realized she had been changed. The motel had claimed so much, but it had also given her a gift, the strength to face the unspeakable. The sun began to rise, painting the sky with a warm embrace. As she watched the first rays of light creep over the horizon, she knew she had survived the night's embrace. But the journey had just begun. The season finale of the night's embrace leaves viewers with a mix of relief and trepidation. Sarah's escape from the clutches of the malevolent spirit is a victory, but the knowledge of what lies beneath the surface of the mundane world is a burden she carries with her forever. The motel's destruction marks the end of one chapter, but the whispers of the ancient paths linger, hinting at more dark secrets waiting to be uncovered. The script weaves together elements of horror, suspense, and the supernatural, crafting a tale that is both terrifying and emotionally resonant. The setting of the motel becomes a character in its own right, a living, breathing entity that feeds on fear and despair. The twists and turns of the narrative keep the audience guessing until the very end, and the resolution offers a poignant reflection on the nature of courage and the cost of uncovering the truth. The writing is rich in atmosphere, painting vivid images of the motel's decay and the oppressive weight of the spirit's presence. The dialogue is tight, revealing character and advancing the plot without unnecessary exposition. The pacing is relentless, building tension with each passing moment until the climactic confrontation releases it in a cathartic burst of action and revelation. In the end, The Night's Embrace is a story not just about survival, but about finding the strength to face the shadows within ourselves and the world around us. It's a testament to the human spirit and its unyielding determination to find the light, even in the darkest of places. The script leaves the door open for a second season, with the promise of further exploration into the mysteries of the ancient paths and the fate of those who dare to tread upon them. Will Sarah be drawn back into the darkness, or will she find a way to live in the light, forever haunted by the memories of her night in the Welcome Inn? Only time will tell. Epilogue. 6 months later, Sarah sits in her apartment, surrounded by her notes and the few possessions she managed to salvage from her ordeal. The news reports of the motel's disappearance have faded, but the echoes of that night still resonate within her. Her phone buzzes with an anonymous message, a simple set of coordinates, and a single word, welcome. Her heart skips a beat. Is it a threat or a call to arms? She knows she can't ignore it. There are more lost souls out there, and she's the only one who can help them find their way home. With a steely resolve, she packs her bag and heads for the door, ready to face whatever the night has in store. The journey continues, and with it, the promise of more chilling tales from the twisted world of the night's embrace. At night, Sarah's eyes are glued to the GPS, her knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. Rain hammers the windshield, turning the wipers into a metronome of fear. The GPS insists she's arrived at her destination, but all she sees is the same never-ending forest, the same eerie fog that has plagued her all night. GPS voice, you have arrived at your destination. Sarah frowns, frustrated and desperate. She slams the GPS onto the passenger seat. SARAH, this can't be right. There's nothing here. Her eyes catch a glimpse of taillights fading into the distance. It's the truck, the same one that's been playing cat and mouse with her since the start of her nightmare. The once abandoned motel looms before her, the neon sign flickering like a heartbeat. Rain soaks her to the bone as she sprints to the office, breathless. She pushes the door open to find the room unchanged since her last visit, as if time has been held at bay by an invisible force. The air is thick with dust and a lingering scent of decay. The motel's ledger sits open on the desk, the last entry reading Sarah. She flips through the pages, finding her name scribbled alongside countless others, all with the same date, the day she first arrived. Sarah sits on the bed, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of the spirit that has haunted her. She pulls out her phone, the screen illuminating her weary face. Research has led her to believe that the spirit is a young girl, Lily, who died in a tragic accident at the motel. The hallway outside her room is a maze of flickering lights and shadows. Sarah gathers her courage and steps out, her footsteps echoing like gunshots in the emptiness. The air is cold, thick with the weight of untold stories. Later, Sarah sits cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by newspaper clippings and old photographs. A pattern emerges, Lily's smiling face in every picture, the same room number in every article, room 104. Her heart racing, Sarah approaches the room, the number etched in her mind. The door creaks open, revealing a space frozen in time. The bed is unmade, toys scattered across the floor. The TV flickers with static, whispering faint cries. The whispers grow louder as Sarah approaches the old television. The static clears to reveal a home video, a young family playing, their laughter piercing the silence. A sudden crash, a scream, and the video cuts to black. Sarah finds a hidden compartment in the wall, a stash of forgotten possessions. At the bottom, a locket with a picture of Lily and a man she recognizes as the truck driver. The pieces of the puzzle start to fit together. Sarah confronts the truck driver, whose name she now knows is Richard. His eyes are filled with pain and regret as he recounts the story of Lily, his daughter, who wandered into the forest and never returned. Richard sobbing, "I've been searching for her for so long." Guided by Richard's tearful confession, Sarah follows the path into the forest, the rain a gentle lullaby in the background. The trees whisper her name, leading her to a hidden clearing. Sarah, now a detective, discovers Lily's remains. The sight of the small, lifeless body haunts her. She vows to find justice, not knowing the twisted fate that awaits her. Sarah stands before the makeshift shrine she created, realizing the truth. She wasn't on vacation. She was searching for Lily, subconsciously drawn to the motel by her own investigation. The room shifts, the walls pulsing with an eerie glow. Sarah is no longer alone. Lily stands before her, a spectre of innocence lost. Lily whispers, "Help me, please." Later, Sarah, armed with newfound resolve, faces Lily's spirit. She holds out the locket, offering it back to the girl. Sarah soothingly, "I'll find peace for you, Lily, I promise." At night, the hallways stretch and twist, a labyrinth of despair. Sarah is pursued by the vengeful spirit, a force born from the rage of a grieving father and the anguish of a lost child. Sarah and Richard face each other, their hearts heavy with the truth. She understands his pain, but she must end this cycle. Sarah firmly let her go. "Richard, it's time." The tent flaps open, and a gust of wind blows through, extinguishing the candles. The evidence around them vanishes, leaving only Sarah and Lily's spirit. Sarah buries the locket at the base of a tree, a symbolic gesture of letting go. The storm outside calms, the rain now a gentle caress. In the morning, sunlight filters through the curtains, painting the room in a warm glow. Sarah wakes up, her nightmare a distant memory, or so she thinks. The locket lies on the bedside table, a chilling reminder. Sarah checks out, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. As she leaves, the locket slips from her pocket, landing at the door's threshold. Sarah's GPS flickers back to life, the screen displaying Route 62. She takes a deep breath and starts the engine, ready to leave the motel behind. The motel vanishes in her rearview mirror, but the feeling of being watched lingers. The truck appears again, its driver's seat empty. Sarah's eyes widen as she realizes the truth. She's been chasing her own ghosts. The GPS guides her off the main road, onto an unmarked path. Sarah's hand trembles as she follows, the forest swallowing her whole. Sarah stands in the clearing, the tent now a faded memory. The locket lies open in her hand, the picture of Lily and Richard fluttering in the breeze. The truck reappears, a silent sentinel. Sarah steps out of her car, walking towards it. The door opens, and she climbs in, the seat warm from Richard's ghostly presence. The truck drives away, the locket falling from Sarah's hand. The camera pans out, revealing the motel in the distance, its sign flickering once more. The truck turns a corner, and the motel is gone. Sarah, now a spirit herself, watches her car disappear down the road. The cycle continues, bound by the invisible threads of grief and guilt. The locket lands in the dirt, the picture of Lily smiling up at the sky. The camera zooms in, the image blurring until all that remains is the faint outline of two figures, hand in hand, walking into the light. The motel sign flickers once, twice, and then goes dark. The forest, once a prison of shadows, is now a peaceful sanctuary. The spirits of Lily and Richard finally at rest. The real Sarah wakes with a start, her hand still on the steering wheel. The GPS reads, "You have arrived at your destination." She looks around, the forest gone, replaced by the bustling city she sought. Later in her apartment, Sarah sits at her desk, the locket before her. She writes a report on the haunting of the Welcome Inn, her hand shaking as she recounts her own experience. The doorbell rings, interrupting her thoughts. She opens the door to find a little girl, soaking wet, holding a bouquet of flowers. Little girl smiling, "These are for you." Sarah looks into the girl's eyes, seeing a glimpse of Lily. She takes the flowers, a silent thanks. The girl turns and skips away, disappearing into the night. Sarah sets the bouquet on her desk, the locket nestled among the petals. The rain had stopped, and the fog lifted like a veil, revealing the harsh reality of dawn. Sarah stood at the edge of the deserted road, the Welcome Inn behind her now just a distant memory. Or so she hoped. Her journey back to civilization had been fraught with terror, but she had survived. Her heart hammered in her chest as she took in the unchanged landscape, wondering if she had truly escaped the motel's clutches. The quiet was eerie, the silence so profound it was almost a sound of its own. She turned to look at her car, the reliable beacon of sanity in the madness, now caked with mud and leaves from her harrowing ordeal. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat, the warmth of the interior a stark contrast to the chill outside. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a comforting symphony of metal and fire. As she drove, the sun peeked through the clouds, casting a weak but hopeful light upon the road ahead. The world outside her window was a blur of greens and browns, a stark contrast to the monochromatic nightmare she had endured. The radio crackled to life, static giving way to a news report about a missing persons case along Route 62. Her stomach lurched as she realized she was the subject of the story. The road home was long and winding, but it was a journey she had to make. With every mile, the motel felt further behind her, yet the weight of its secrets remained. Her thoughts swirled like the mist around her, a maelstrom of doubt and fear. Had she really seen those things? Or was it all just a manifestation of her own guilt and anxiety? Days turned into weeks, and the world outside the motel grew more and more distant. Sarah's family and friends were relieved to have her back, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't truly home. She'd tell them of her ordeal, but her words always fell short of the mark. How could she explain the unexplainable? The way the motel had seeped into her very soul. Her nights were plagued by vivid dreams of the motel's corridors, the whispers of lost souls echoing in her ears. She'd wake with a start, her bed sheets tangled around her like the vines that had once held her captive. The scent of the motel's musty carpets and stale air clung to her, even though she knew it was only a memory. The first sign that something was still wrong came when she noticed her phone's GPS acting erratically again. It was the same erratic behavior that had led her astray in the first place. She ignored it at first, attributing it to a faulty update or a glitch in the system. But when she saw the road sign for Route 62 in the middle of her suburban street, she couldn't ignore it anymore. The motel was following her. Sarah tried to live her life as normally as possible, but the motel's hold grew stronger. Objects in her house would shift in the night, leaving her to question her own sanity. Shadows danced in the corners of her eyes, and the distant hum of the motel's neon sign pulsed in her ears. Her once vibrant world had been tainted by the spectral hue of the supernatural. One evening, she found herself unable to resist the call. The need to understand, to face her fears one last time, grew to great. She climbed into her car and set off into the night, retracing her steps to the phantom intersection. The road was eerily familiar, each bend and curve a haunting reminder of her journey. The city lights grew dimmer, the world around her swallowed by the encroaching forest, and there it was, the welcome inn, standing tall and foreboding, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Her car rolled to a stop, and she stepped out into the cold embrace of the night. The motel was unchanged, a monument to the horrors she had faced. But this time, she wasn't alone. Lily, the mysterious girl she had encountered within its walls, was waiting for her. "You can't outrun your destiny," Lily said, her eyes gleaming with a knowing that seemed centuries old. "You're part of this place now." Sarah searched the girl's face for any hint of malice, but found only a solemn resignation. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "The motel needs a keeper," Lily replied. "Someone to listen to the whispers, to keep the lost souls at bay." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "But why me?" Lily led her into the motel's office, the walls lined with dusty files, unforgotten memories. She pulled out an ancient ledger, its pages yellowed with age. "Every person who has encountered the motel has had a choice," she said, flipping through the pages. "You chose to listen." Sarah's eyes fell upon her name, written in a hand she didn't recognize. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The motel had chosen her, and now she was bound to it. "But I don't want this," she protested. "I want my life back." "You can't escape your fate," Lily said gently, "but you can choose how you live it." Overwhelmed, Sarah agreed to become the motel's keeper. She would listen to the whispers, help the lost find peace, and keep the malevolent spirits at bay. It was a heavy burden, but she felt a strange sense of purpose in her new role. The days that followed were a blur of research and preparation. She learned the motel's secrets, the rituals that had once been performed on the land, and the stories of those who had come before her. With each passing night, she grew stronger, more attuned to the whispers that filled the air. The scene unfolds in the motel's lobby, the once decrepit space now filled with the warm glow of candles and the soft whispers of those who had found peace. Sarah sits behind the desk, her eyes reflecting the flickering light. A weary traveler, much like herself, enters, seeking refuge from the dark. "You're lost," she says, her voice firm but kind. "Let me help you find your way." In the end, Sarah discovered that the motel wasn't a prison, but a bridge between worlds. A place where the lost could find their way home, and the haunted could find peace. Her journey had transformed her into something more than she ever thought possible. And though she had left the motel behind in body, in spirit, she had become its guardian, forever bound to the ancient paths that weave through the fabric of reality. The road home had been fraught with terror and revelation, but it had also been one of growth and understanding. Sarah had found her purpose in the most unlikely of places, and she knew that she would carry the motel with her, in her heart and in her soul, for the rest of her days. The camera pans out, the motel's neon sign flickering in the night. The words welcoming seem to pulse with a life of their own, a beacon to those who dare to take the road less traveled. And somewhere, in the shadows, the ghosts of the lost watch over, grateful for the sanctuary they had found in the most unexpected of places. The episode ends with Sarah walking the hallowed halls of the motel, her footsteps echoing through the night. The door to room 12, the epicenter of her torment, is open, the light within a soft, inviting glow. She pauses, a hint of a smile playing on her lips, and then continues on, her destiny now intertwined with the very fabric of the supernatural. The final scene is of the road, stretching out into the horizon, a symbol of the endless journey that lies ahead. The camera lingers for a moment, the credits rolling, leaving the audience to ponder the mysteries that await those who dare to take the detour into the unknown. Sarah's heart races as she opens the envelope with trembling hands. The paper within is thick, almost velvety to the touch, and a faint, unpleasant scent clings to it like the damp earth of the forest floor. The handwriting is meticulous, the ink a deep, foreboding black. "Welcome back, Sarah," it reads. "Your room awaits you at the welcome inn." Her eyes widen in horror as she recognizes the name of the place she thought she'd left behind. The abandoned motel, the eerie forest, the malevolent spirit, how could it all be real? The previous episodes of her life had played out like a surreal nightmare she could never quite shake. She'd tried to convince herself it was all in her head, a figment of her overactive imagination, fueled by stress and exhaustion. But the message was real, tangible proof that the motel was more than just a figment of her imagination. The day had started like any other. Sarah sat in her living room, the comforting glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face as she scrolled through emails and job opportunities. The quiet hum of the fridge and the distant sound of a car passing by offered a semblance of normalcy. She'd managed to keep her experiences at the welcome in a secret from everyone, even her closest friends. But now, the very realness of the invitation hid them, and the memories feel as vivid as if they'd occurred only moments ago. The decision to return to the motel weighs heavily on her. She knows she can't ignore the call, not after the way she'd barely escaped with her life. But she's also aware that going back could mean stepping into a horror she might not survive a second time. Days later, with a mix of dread and determination, Sarah finds herself driving down the same deserted road, the same thick fog and rain obscuring her vision. The trees seem to lean in closer, whispering secrets that only the damned can hear. The GPS beeps in an eerily familiar tone, and she clenches the steering wheel, fighting the urge to turn around. As the fog lifts, the welcome inn looms before her, a dilapidated relic of a bygone era. Its neon sign flickers erratically, casting a sickly green glow on the wet asphalt. She parks her car, the engine's purr echoing through the empty lot. The air is thick with anticipation, the kind that comes before a storm, as if the very fabric of reality is holding its breath. The lobby is as she remembered it, the stale scent of dust and decay, the ancient bell on the counter that never stopped ringing. She checks in with the same lifeless, plastic smile on her face, trying to ignore the cold sweat that trickles down her spine. Her room is unchanged. The bedspread a faded floral pattern that seems to pulse with a sinister life of its own. The walls whisper secrets of past guests, their anguished cries echoing through the years. She sets her bag down and takes a deep, shaky breath. That night, she dreams of Lily, the mysterious girl who had offered her guidance. The child's eyes are filled with a knowing sadness that seems to reach out to her, begging for help. When she wakes, the room is ice cold, and she can feel the weight of something malevolent watching her from the shadows. The following day, Sarah starts her investigation anew. She speaks with the locals, some of whom seem genuinely surprised to see the motel open again. They tell her of a man named Marcus, the original owner of the welcome inn, whose family had suffered a string of tragedies. His daughter, Lily, had gone missing one night, the same night that the motel had closed its doors for good. Her curiosity piqued, Sarah delves deeper into the motel's archives, uncovering a trove of newspaper clippings and old photographs. A portrait of a young, hopeful-looking Marcus and his family sends a chill down her spine. She can't shake the feeling that she's being led down a path she's already walked. That evening, as the rain beats a mournful tattoo against the windows, she finds an old journal hidden in the office. It's Marcus's handwriting, detailing his descent into madness and his obsession with the ancient paths beneath the motel. He'd believed that by opening a gateway to the spirit world, he could bring Lily back. The journal leads her to a hidden room in the basement, a place where the very air feels thick with anger and despair. Here, she discovers the gateway, a series of runes and symbols etched into the floorboards, now dark with what appears to be old blood. The realization hits her like a sledgehammer. She's been invited back to play a part in the motel's grisly legacy. Confronted by the spirit of Marcus, she learns that he had indeed opened the gateway, but it had consumed him. Now, it seeks a new host to continue its dark work. He begs her to close the door before it's too late. The final act unfolds as Sarah faces the spirit of the moteler, manifestation of the collective grief and rage of the lost souls trapped within. It's a battle of wills, her determination to survive pitted against the relentless hunger of the spirit. She's pushed to the brink of sanity, her world warping around her as the spirit attempts to claim her. With Lily's help, she finds the strength to resist. The two of them, bound by a shared tragedy, work together to seal the gateway. The room shakes as the spirit screams in fury, the floorboards groaning in protest as the ancient power is contained once more. As dawn breaks, the motel is restored to its abandoned state. Sarah emerges from the ruins, her clothes tattered and her eyes haunted. The rain has stopped, and the fog is lifting. The welcoming sign flickers one last time before going dark. Back in her room, she finds the invitation on the bed, now tinged with the scent of burnt oak and a hint of something sweet. Lily's ghostly presence offering her a silent goodbye. Sarah knows she's made a fateful choice. She's closed the door on the motel's horrors, but she's also trapped the girl she'd come to care for. The season ends with Sarah leaving the motel, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. She knows she can't tell anyone what happened, they'd never believe her. But as she pulls out of the lot, she sees a figure in the rearview mirror, a small, transparent girl in a yellow raincoat, standing in the rain, watching her go. The road ahead stretches out, promising the comfort of home and safety. But Sarah can't shake the feeling that she's left a piece of herself behind. And as she drives away, she wonders if the welcome inn will ever truly let her go. The final scene pans out to show the motel, shrinking in the distance, a silent sentinel of the secrets it holds. The camera lingers on the darkened sign, the word welcome flickering back to life for just a moment, hinting at the horrors that await anyone foolish enough to accept the invitation. The end credits roll, leaving the audience with more questions than answers, setting the stage for the next season's descent into the dark, twisted world of the welcome inn. Thank you so much for joining me on this cinematic journey. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Have you experienced a spine-chilling horror that left you trembling? Share your terrifying tale with us by emailing nightmarenetwork@hotmail.com, and we'd be thrilled to feature it on our platform. Until next time, happy movie watching.